Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Pastor Jeremy from Emmanuel Faith. Thank you so much for joining Alternatives Medical Center for 500 Heroes kind of online breakfast today. I hope you're having something good, but what I'm really hoping is that God touches your heart and your mind for this mission to save the unborn. It is a mission that is vital for Escondido, for the world, for all of us. It's part of the gospel mission that we're called to as believers. And so we thank Tammy and her team for putting this together and letting us be a part of it. It's really exciting. We've got a great lineup for you today as far as ways to engage and understand what is going on in this world and how do we step in to this mission field of helping moms and dads and helping the unborn and helping understand what to do when abortion's a real thing and a real thing we're facing. And so let me just remind you a couple quick things before we get started. One, yes, this is on YouTube. You can share it with friends, family, coworkers, whoever else you like. Whoever needs to hear this or whoever you want to encourage by it, send them the link. You can just copy and paste it. It's going to be also online, on the website, on Facebook, Instagram. So send that out. Share it with as many people as you can. It's good for all of us to hear these things. Also, if you're home right now, have somebody take a picture of you watching this online. Take a selfie if you can, whatever you need to do. But this is a way that you could put it on Facebook yourself, you could put it on Instagram, you can show the world that you care. And that's what we care about, is that we all care and jump in this together. So you're going to want to use on Instagram the @ symbol and then Alternatives MC. For Facebook, it's just Alternatives Medical Clinic. Really simple. So with that, we're gonna jump in and we're going to begin with Pastor Todd Hitchcock. Thank you so much, Todd, for hosting, and thank you so much for letting us be here to join you today.
Thank you, Jeremy. It really is an honor and a privilege to launch this time together with you this morning. I've had the opportunity to be a board member in the past for the clinic, as well as each week I come in and pray with the ladies. And so I've had a unique opportunity to see some of the very deep background of what happens at Alternatives. And I want you to know how important this ministry is, the impact, the lives that are changed, the women, the men, the children, the unborn that are all being impacted in a great way. Lives are being saved every day, every week as more and more people come in. And it really is just an incredible opportunity to see the heart, the compassion, the passion for right to life, especially this issue, and even just medical issues as the ministry continues to grow. And so let me pray as we begin this time. God, we thank you for this ministry that we get the opportunity to have here in Escondido, in North County. Lord, we thank you for Tammy. We thank you for the ladies that work so hard, that give emotionally, that give spiritually, that give relationally. God, we thank you for the churches also that partner together to help support and build and grow this ministry. And Lord, we thank you for this opportunity today to come together, to pray, to seek your face, to hear Sean as he speaks and shares a great word. Lord, I lift him up and I pray, Lord, that you would speak through him, that you would motivate us and inspire us to even have a greater commitment to the life of the unborn, to the mission of Alternatives. And so, God, we lift up this time to you. We pray a blessing over the clinic, over those that serve day in and day out. Lord, give them the emotional energy that they need. Give them the spiritual insight. God, I pray that in all things that they would gain their strength from you. The joy of the Lord would be their strength. God, thanks for this time. We lift it up to you, and we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Todd, thank you so much for such a wonderful invocation this morning. Next I'm going to introduce Tammy De Armas. I'm going to invite her up in just a moment, but let me just remind you that Jesus has called Tammy to be the leader of this movement, to be this leader, to point us, one, to Jesus, but also point us to this mission field. So we can be called with her to serve the people around us. But not in just any way, not just to help them understand some truth and help them understand what's going on, but in a way where we can give real care to hurting people, to people who've got something they've been hiding, to people who are just confused about what to do, because it's scary. And God has given Tammy this voice and this passion and this desire to say, I see you, I hear you, I want to help you. And so without further ado, let me invite up Tammy De Armas. Thanks, Tammy.
Thank you, Jeremy. It is an honor to be the CEO at Alternatives, and the calling was because of the very battlefield that I fell on. So I resonate with those women that come in and sit on the couch, and I see their eyes deer in the headlights, and I've been there, and I've done that, and I fell. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think of that little one that would have been 37 years old last week. So I know there's many other men and women that are part of this battle, part of this army, and raising men and women to speak truth in the light of all the evil in the world. That's part of what we do, and speaking it passionately to the men and women that come in our doors. We started this year off great. We were about 10% up in patients between the fall and the first quarter of this year. Many more ABIs, which they're the abort intent individuals. They're men and women that come to us that are intent on aborting. But what could we possibly tell them? Men coming for STI testing. Last fall, we hit record highs at Cal State, at Palomar, and that was huge. But now, since COVID hit, we've been pulled in. May I just say, we battle for life, and we know the lives that have been lost in COVID. But here's a silence that nobody's speaking about. 500 lives are killed daily in the state of California due to abortion. So approximately, because it's a non-reporting state. So I ask each of you to be praying for those men and women and those decisions that they're making, and for each of you to get out and speak boldly. This is something that we need as part of a pro-life, a pro-compassion ministry for the men and women. And that's why we have this breakfast, because men are the leaders of the family, and if the men speak boldly, we know if there's a father involved, there's a greater chance for that child to live. We are open now, and we are seeing the effects of what's happening. Tough stories. I can't share, we're a medical clinic, but I ask that you keep praying for us, and the opportunities will come. Our mobile unit, I just secured yesterday that our mobile unit will be back out again. Might not be at the college campuses, but we've secured some places where it can be in the community, so that young men and women can even go to the mobile unit if they can't make it to the fixed space. So that's huge. As we move forward, I ask that you remember we're the last ray of hope and the first sign of mercy for many of these men and women. We also have our post-abortion classes. Right now we're in need of a man to step forward and come alongside men that have fallen in this battlefield. So if you know of anyone, no matter where you are, I'd love to talk to you. One of the things that, the verses that strikes me is 2 Corinthians 1:3-5. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of all comfort, who comforts us in our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort which we ourselves are comforted by God. And honestly, I can't think of a better verse for many of us. That's why we reach out. That's why we want to help. Someone shared truth to us, and it was revealed, and we were comforted by the Lord. And with that, I'd like to bring up a speaker who was actually at 500 Heroes last year and heard one of the speakers. And as a result, his life was changed. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to change lives for time and eternity. So Gary Bonanno is going to come up and share a little bit of his story. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm grateful, and I'm humbled by this opportunity to be able to speak with you. See, I was adopted as a baby. I didn't find out until I was 19 years old. The woman who was my adoptive mother was in the process of dying, and one of her friends told me because she didn't want me to go on without knowing. I didn't feel any anger towards her. In fact, I was blessed with fantastic parents. But But towards my biological mother, I developed feelings of inadequacy, bitterness, anger, and to be honest, I have to confess that I hated her. Why couldn't you keep me? I attended the 500 Heroes Breakfast last year, and Pastor Joe, you'll get to meet him later, came up and told a story. It was a very moving story. And at one point, everybody began applauding. And he said, hold on, I hope you're applauding for the right reason. I hope you're applauding for my mother who gave me life. And from the moment that those words left his mouth and touched my ears, I felt those feelings of anger and bitterness and hatred just fall away. And I was relieved, and I was happy, and I got up afterwards and I spoke to Pastor Joe, and I thanked him for his story because it had freed me from the anger. I hope that this helps you in some way, and I hope even if we just touch one person, we've made a huge difference. Thank you very much.
Gary, thank you so much for sharing. I've known Gary for a few years. The first day he walked into church, he said, my son told me I need to read Romans. And that's what Dennis was preaching on. He goes, okay, I guess that's where Jesus wants me. And he's got that military background. He's a tough as nails guy. But as he just shared, there was something inside that was broken. And he needed to hear this other story so he could heal from that, so he could forgive, so he could give the love of Christ. So Gary, thank you for being open and honest and vulnerable with us all. So hopefully that impacted you. You know, one of those ways that we use words is to communicate and to make a difference in our life and the lives of others. Our main speaker this morning, Sean Mcdowell, is an expert at this. He's an apologist, an author, a professor, a teacher, a communicator, one of the stars of the Biola basketball team back in the day. But more than that, he's a guy who he brings truth to a new generation. I can't tell you how much his writings and has affected me. I still remember seeing him speak years ago and just getting this new understanding of what we're stepping into as Christians, how to communicate what we actually believe and what we think, and how we do that in a way that's loving and kind, and not just a way to argue and a way to win arguments. And Sean does that with grace. He does that with truth. He does that with love. So let me welcome up Sean Mcdowell, and thank you so much, Sean, for being here with us.
Thanks so much for having me. Hey, it's such a joy to be here with you today. Not long ago, actually it was a while ago, I was with my family in San Francisco enjoying a beautiful day. And we went biking across the bridge, I believe it was, to a little place called Sausalito. And as we were walking in to go shop, I saw these two girls that were sitting there, college-age girls, and they were taking funds, donations to help the polar bears. I said to my wife, I said, you know what? I just want to ask them a question. Now, she knows me well enough that gives me the look like I know where this sometimes leads. I said, I just have a question for him. So I walked up and said, hey, my name is Sean. I'm curious. You're taking money to help the polar bears. I said, that's great. But I'm curious. You value animal life. Do you value human life? Are you pro-life or are you pro-choice? Well, this girl basically loses it and she says, you know what? I bet you're a Christian. You don't even care about women. And starts lecturing me. I said, I actually didn't tell you anything about what I believe. I'm really just curious, wanting to have a conversation. You take money for animals on the other side of the world, good for you. What about the human beings that are amongst us? Do you care about them? Well, it turns out, even though I listened and I was patient, she invites her friend over and goes, hey, this guy's pro-life. And her friend goes, you know what? I had 4 abortions and it felt good. And they started mocking me. In fact, the girl turned to me and she goes, you know what? How do you know how do you know embryos are real? Do you have one inside you? And to be honest with you, my sarcasm got the best of me. I said, how do you know polar bears are real? Do you have one inside of you? And I paused and thought, you know what? That probably wasn't the most gracious thing to say, but it hit me. Even in conversations where I wish I could take back some things that I said, this is a divisive issue. This is an issue that divides people today. And as Christians, we need to speak truth on this issue, but we've got to learn how to do it with love. So at the start, I figured I'd let you know right away where I stand on this issue. And it might surprise me being invited to speak to the Alternatives Medical Clinic. So I want you to know that I'm actually pro-choice. I am actually pro-choice. I am pro-choice if the unborn is not human. You see, that's the question. The big question is not political, although this has political implications. The heart of the question is, what is the unborn? What is it? So I want you to imagine a scenario with me. I imagine after you're watching this, you go in the kitchen, and some of you men decide to do the dishes. Now, I know for some of you this takes a lot of imagination. You're doing the dishes, and your back is turned, and maybe your son or daughter who's 4 or 5 walks in and says, "Hey, Dad, can I kill this?" Now, before you say yes or no, what question would you ask? You would ask, what is it? Right? If you turn around, it's a cockroach, you'd be like, yeah, go ahead. If you turn around, it's a snake, you'd be like, well, what kind of snake is it? If you turn around, it's a bunny, you'd be like, okay, that's kind of messed up. That's a cute bunny. If you turn around, your 5-year-old's like, hey, I pulled this infant out of a carriage down the road. Can I kill this? You go, whoa, time out. The answer is definitely no. And son or daughter, you need counseling even though you're only 5. See, the bottom line is the heart of this question of pro-life and pro-choice is, what is the unborn? Is the unborn a member of the human community? If so, that changes everything. It changes everything. Now, we're going to walk through today what it means to be a hero on this issue. But before we go any further, I do want to say something that I hope sinks in. Please don't be tempted to believe that somehow having an abortion or contributing to this is the unforgivable sin. Friends, it's not. I've met so many men who have encouraged their wives or their girlfriends or their daughters to have an abortion, and they live with that guilt. And so many women who've decided to have an abortion for a range of reasons. Please know that Jesus died for you and that you are forgiven. There is freedom that comes from knowing that you are forgiven for this. So rather than thinking if you came out and shared that story that you would be shamed, know that we would love you and we would rejoice with you in the freedom that you would experience, knowing that Jesus forgives you just as he forgives me. With that said, let's talk about what it means to be a hero. Because as I think about it, in our culture today, there's very different views. In fact, sometimes our culture talks about a hero if you can put a ball in a hoop, or if you can make a pass that somebody catches and scores a touchdown. Now, that's exciting, good for the person, but is that a hero? Jesus had a pretty different definition of a hero, didn't he? You see, Jesus said the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Jesus' view of being a hero was caring for those who couldn't care for themselves. That's why he healed the paralytic. That's why he healed the blind. That's why Jesus went out of his way to care for the marginalized. In fact, that's why in James 1:27, the brother of Jesus talks about this is pure and undefiled religion, caring for widows and caring for orphans. Why? Why should you care about widows and orphans? In that culture, they were not considered valuable, but Christians said they mattered. You know why? Because they're made in the image of God. That's the Christian ethic, is that everybody, regardless of gender, age, socioeconomic status, race, human beings are made in the image of God and have value. A hero in my book is somebody who cares for those who can't care for themselves, because that's exactly what Jesus did. So how can you and I be heroes as men in this culture we live in that doesn't value life and it doesn't celebrate life? In fact, in many ways, you could say we live in a culture of death, and a culture that says our choices reign supreme no matter who we affect in the middle of it. Well, one thing we can do is learn to know what we believe and why we believe it, to have our own convictions about life, and be ready to have conversations. Because what happens with these conversations, we don't get to plan it. Somebody gets an unwanted pregnancy, and the question is, will we be ready to lovingly and graciously help this person make the ultimate right choice? That's the question. So I want to lay out for you a very simple case that when I teach high school, I make my students memorize this because it's that important. I can tell you, I've been on planes in conversations where somebody asks me, pull out a napkin, and I simply write it down. And here it is. Here's a simple case to help us show that the unborn is human from the moment of conception. So it's 3 points. Number one, the unborn is alive. Let me say it again. The unborn is alive. Sometimes you'll hear people say, we don't really know when life begins. Friends, this is just false and it's uninformed. We know that the unborn is alive from the moment of conception. You say, Sean, how do you know that? Well, for one, there's no period of non-life. Sperm is alive, the egg is alive, mom is alive, the dad is alive. There is no moment of non-life in this chain, so to speak. But second, if you pull out a biology textbook, you actually can see certain criteria of life, such as reaction to stimuli or biological growth. And guess what? The unborn has all of these. But third, let me ask you a question. What does abortion do? Abortion, by its very nature, is to end a pregnancy. Abortion kills. You can only kill something that's alive. Friends, there's no scientific debate. From the moment of conception, this unborn is alive. Now, some people might push back and say, well, we don't know, and since we don't really know for sure, since we're agnostic, you should be able to choose life or death. But I want to pause and say, let's be consistent on this thinking. Do we really in life, when we don't know if something is alive or not, do we really just allow somebody to take life? And I would say no. In fact, I brought a small book with me, written by former President Ronald Reagan. And as far as I'm aware, the only sitting president to write a book. And he wrote it in 1984. So this is about a decade after the Roe versus Wade decision. And we're starting to see the fallout in our culture. And it's called Abortion and the Conscience of a Nation. And he gives an example that's in there that's always stuck with me. He says, imagine you come across a body, but you're not sure if the body is alive or if it's dead. Do you go ahead and bury it? Now, the answer is obvious. If we're not sure, the fact that we don't know implies we protect it. We only take life, or we only would bury a body, so to speak, when we know for sure that there is no life. So some of you might recall, I believe it's been about a dozen years, when there was the very first, during the Obama administration, he had a debate with John McCain at this time. And it was at Saddleback Church. The pastor, Rick Warren, was moderating this. And they each were asked questions and couldn't hear the other side response. It was a very interesting exchange, wherever you stand on the political aisle. And one thing I found fascinating is Pastor Warren asked both of them separately, when do you think life begins? And McCain was very unequivocal. He said, life begins at conception, gave his little speech for pro-life. Some of you might remember what Obama's response was. Obama said, quote, it's above my pay grade. Remember that? He said it's above my pay grade. Remember sitting there thinking, if he says it's above his pay grade, then he concedes he's not sure. And if he's not sure, shouldn't we err on the side of protecting life? We certainly do in a building. If your job is to level a building and then construct a new building, nobody says, hey, let's blow this thing up. And you go, is there life or not? No one would say, I'm not sure. We don't know. Let's go ahead and blow it up anyways. No, you would only level it when you know for sure there's no life. So in our first step, the unborn is alive. We know unmistakably, science shows us unequivocally, that the moment of conception, this unborn is alive. But even if we weren't sure, life should still get the benefit of doubt. So our first step is that the unborn is alive. Let's look at our second step. The unborn is separate from the mother. The unborn is separate from the mother. Now, the unborn is inside of the mother. It's dependent upon the mother. It has a certain relationship with the mother. But my point, which science shows, is that the unborn is a distinct organism from the mother. Now again, you're probably thinking, how do I know this? Well, there's a few things we know. Number one, the unborn, 50% of the time, is a different sex than the mother. A different sex, which by the way is determined at the moment of conception. Second, it can have a different blood type, which is determined by DNA, but expresses itself only a few weeks into conception. Third, skin color. If you have a white mom and a black dad, or vice versa, or any other race, the unborn can have a distinct skin color from the mother. And last, perhaps most convincing, is DNA. You can't have two distinct kinds of DNA in one individual human being, but the mother has a DNA fingerprint, and the unborn has a separate, distinct DNA fingerprint. So we know this unborn thing is alive. Second, we know it's dependent upon, but distinct as an organism from the mother. Now, maybe you've heard this objection. I walk this through with my students. You say, well, a woman can do whatever she wants to with her own body. How would you respond to that? Stop and think for a second. If someone said to you, well, you know what? I'm in favor of abortion because a woman can do whatever she wants to with her own body. My first response would be to say, it's not her body. It's not her body. Again, it might be in her body and dependent upon her body, but it is a distinct biological organism from her body. But second, that's actually false. I mean, can you think of anything that a woman or a man cannot do with their own body? I can think of a few. I'll tell my students to make the point sink home. I'll say, look, if you decide you want to go walk along Main Street with your body naked, you do not have the moral or legal right to do this. Why? If you run out there naked and go, hey, it's my body, I can do whatever I want to, the police and the rest of the public will say, and no offense, this applies to all of us, sorry, but you're harming society. That's what the line will be. Friends, number one, the unborn is not the mother's body. And second, we actually don't have a right to do whatever we want with our own bodies. In fact, our rights are limited when we are going to harm another human being. So our first point is the unborn is alive. Second, the unborn is distinct from the mother. But third, are you ready? The unborn is human. The unborn is human. Now, how do we know this? Look, we have 3 kids. My youngest is 7. And I remember when my wife was pregnant with our youngest, we had discussions about what we were going to have, but we never had this discussion. My wife never said, you know, I would love a dolphin. I was like, a dolphin? I want a cheetah. Are you kidding me? How cool would that be? Of course, we didn't have that silly conversation. We had a conversation related to boy or girl, but we knew the unborn was going to be, our child was going to be human because mom is human and dad is human. The principle of biogenesis says we reproduce after our kind, not to mention DNA. So let me just take a step back and remind you of what we've looked at. We know from the moment of conception the unborn is alive, it's distinct from the mother, and it's human. Friends, you get any biology textbook, any embryological textbook, and what I said is common sense 101 material everybody knows. But you know what people will say? They'll say, okay, maybe it's human, but it's not a person. Maybe the unborn is human, but it's not a person. By the way, what kind of rights do we have? We have human rights. And who gets human rights? Humans get human rights. So if the unborn is human, and all humans get rights, then the unborn should get human rights. But nevertheless, people say, well, it's not a person. Now, if someone's going to argue that, they're going to have to say, here's some criteria that persons have that the unborn does not. Does that make sense? So if someone says, okay, the unborn is human, but it's not a person, they have to tell us what criteria of personhood the unborn lacks that the rest of us who are persons have. And the problem is there's no consistent criteria by which this works. So I make my students memorize this. Here's a simple acronym. Maybe you've heard it before. It's called SLED. This shows the differences between born and unborn, and that none of these are enough to disqualify the unborn from personhood. So the S in SLED stands for size. Is the unborn smaller than those outside of the womb? Not in every case, but typically yes. So let me ask you a question. Does your size determine your value? Does your size determine your value? Friends, I think we know the answer is no. The answer is no. Imagine that size determined value. Who would be more valuable? The Swedish, who are the tallest people on earth, the Japanese, who on average are the shortest? Of course, that's a silly question because our value doesn't base upon our size. Who'd be more valuable, men or women? Again, silly question. We all know it's women anyways. Value does not come from size. In fact, even kids' books get this. Some of you know what Dr. Seuss book I'm talking about. Horton Hears a Who, there's a famous line that says, "A person is a person, no matter how small." So size is not enough to disqualify the unborn. How about level of development? Are the unborn less developed? Typically, yes, not always, but typically so. So because the unborn are less developed, does that mean they're not full persons? I want you to think about this for a second. If our value came from our level of development, who would be more valuable, adults or teens? Now, some of you are like, that's an easy question. I have teens. No, okay, I'm kidding. I'm messing with you. Of course not. We know that. Who'd be more valuable? They're equal. Who's more valuable, teens or elementary? Who's more valuable, elementary or kindergarten? Kindergarten or infants? Infants or in the womb? You see, development is a continuum from conception through life. It's a part of human life to develop from that moment of existence for decades until we hit about my age and you start going the other direction, but that's a separate issue. Friends, our value does not come from our level of development. We know this. So size doesn't make the unborn less valuable, neither does level of development. How about environment? Are the unborn in a different environment? Yes. Let me ask you the question again. Hopefully you're following with my reasoning. Does where we are determine what we are? The answer, of course, is no. Does our value come from where we are? The answer again is no. I was reading a story not long ago about this baby that was born, and it was about at the barrier, somewhere in the 5 to 6 month range of right now range, where our technology allows a baby born prematurely to still survive. It was right on that brink. And according to the story, these doctors work heroically to save this baby's life, and they did. I mean, you could hold this baby. I don't even remember the weight or size of it, but you could hold it in the palm of your hand, and its skin was almost translucent. And they saved the life of this baby. Now imagine a week later, a doctor walks in, same exact doctor, and takes an instrument and cuts up and kills this baby. What would we call that? In that case, we'd probably call it murder. Now just think about the reasoning behind this. Could be the same doctor, could be the same child, same instruments, virtually the same action. One is called murder, and one is considered legal and in some cases moral. Friends, what's the difference? One big difference is only the environment. How does the environment that this child is in determine its value or its right to life? That's what doesn't make sense to me. Friend, the unborn is different unmistakably in terms of its size. It's smaller. The unborn is different unmistakably in terms of its level of development. It's different unmistakably in terms of its environment that's in. But none of these are sufficient to deny the unborn personhood and hence the right to life. Now, the last one, since the acronym is SLED, size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. Is the unborn uniquely dependent upon the mother? And the answer is yes, based upon our current technology. Someday we might have the day, 4 months, 3 months, 2 months, weeks, where you can raise a child completely in an artificial womb. That's certainly possible. But right now, the unborn is uniquely dependent upon the mother. Does this mean it loses its right to life and that abortion is somehow morally just? Friends, let me give you another scenario to imagine. Imagine you go snowmobiling in, say, Yellowstone. I've been there snowmobiling in the winter one time, and it was pretty fun, and I probably went a little bit too fast, but it was just fun. Now imagine you're out snowmobiling there, and you're ripping through just the forest, going along a trail, having an awesome time, and you come across a snowmobile that had crashed. And you see a father who is passed out in the snow with his 2-year-old child who's sitting there alive, but completely dependent upon you. The survival of this child is 100% dependent upon you. Does that give you the right to say, you know what, it's dependent upon me. I didn't ask to be dependent upon this, to take its life or leave it? I think we'd actually argue its dependence upon you and or me gives us more responsibility towards this child. Friends, yes, the unborn is dependent upon the mother, but that doesn't imply it's not human. That doesn't imply it's not a person. I mean, think about how many people are dependent upon kidney machines or dependent upon other people to feed them food. Does that mean they don't have a right to life? You see, here's what happens. We come up with some criteria for personhood and then decide that the unborn don't qualify. But when we do this and we're consistent, we end up including something we know are not humans like robots or excluding people we know that are, such as people with disabilities. The reality is, anyone who's human is a person, and built within human beings is the capacity to express that personhood. Friends, what have we seen? From the moment of conception, we have an organism, a human being that is alive and distinct from the mother. And there's no good philosophical basis to deny this human being the right to life. Now, one of the common questions I'll get from people if I open it up here is they'll say, yeah, but look at the unborn. I mean, it just doesn't look human. And my answer is, yes, it does. It looks exactly like a human being is supposed to look at that stage of development. You see, we have a sad history, even in our country, of deciding that certain people don't look like the rest of us or look like they should, and thus don't get certain human rights. Done it to women, done it to handicap, done it to blacks and other races. Friends, that is not a Christian response. The unborn are human from the moment of conception. I read a story this week about an African pygmy. This is in the early part of the 1900s. And in the New York Times, they wrote an entire story about this man by the name of Otabenga, how he looked like the missing link since we allegedly came from Africa, put him in a cage, and treated him like an animal because of how he looked. A pastor came, saved him, brought him out, and loved him. But he had been so dehumanized and he had been so mistreated that he eventually took a gun to his own heart and ended his own life. Friends, we have a history of dehumanizing people who we think don't look like the rest of us. I love the story about John Merrick, who's known as the Elephant Man. In fact, the movie in the early 80s, I made my kids watch it because it's a moving, powerful story of somebody who, as a young man, got this condition. They call him the Elephant Man because his whole body and his face and his arms were totally disfigured. And there's a scene in the movie where he's trying to travel through kind of the subway underground area, and he would wear a bag on his head just to hide himself from freaking people out because they would mistreat him because he didn't look like they thought a human being should look. And he's walking a long time and he falls, and the bag comes flying off, and this little girl sees him and screams, ah! Gets all these people attention. He sees this mob coming, so to save his life, he turns and he runs. And he's trying to get away, and this huge mob of people are following him like he's an animal trying to end his life and get rid of him. So he runs into the bathroom to try to save his life, and this mob is there yelling names at him. And finally, he turns back, and at the top of his lungs, he shouts out, he says, "I am not an animal. I am a human being." And the movie pauses. And you see this reflection on their faces that they realize, oh my goodness, you are human. Yeah, you look different, but we shouldn't treat you this way. And they slowly walk away in shame. Friends, in a sense, this is what we're doing to the unborn. We're saying you're inconvenient. You cost too much. You're not a human being, you're a choice. But that is not the ethic that Jesus gave. In our hearts, we know that human beings have value, regardless of how they look or their size or level of development. I teach at Biola University in an apologetics program, but I still teach high school part-time. And probably 12 or 15 years ago, I was teaching a class, and I taught my students over a week the very things that we just learned together today. Walked them through the scientific case, walked them through the philosophical case. And in fact, I'd even have them watch a video of an abortion. I know that's controversial, but I wanted them to know in their minds, when you talk about abortion, here's exactly what it is. And the next year, a girl graduated. She was in college. She came back to see me. And when I was in class, she said, "Hey, can we talk?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "I'm not sure if you wanted to know this or not, but do you remember this pro-life unit last year?" I was like, "Of course." She said, "You know, when we were going through that unit, I actually had a girlfriend, a friend of hers, who became pregnant, and she was thinking about having an abortion. I went and I showed her this case for life, took her to a local pregnancy resource center, like the Alternatives Medical Clinic. I'll never forget what she said next. She said, "And the child was just born." I froze, and I could only think of one thing. I thought, you didn't think I wanted to know this? That might be the most significant thing I have ever done in ministry, that somehow God could use me and my teaching to actually save a life. Friends, that happened to me one time. This is exactly what the Alternatives Medical Clinic does every single day. They're given an option for young women, for young men who are hurting, who feel trapped. They don't have the resources. In their hearts, they know that they don't want to go the route of abortion, but sometimes they don't feel like they have another option. And this group comes alongside them and says, "We're not going to judge you. We love you, and we care for you. We're going to help you make the choice that's best for you and that is best for your child." That's what a hero is, friend. It's someone who stands beside these vulnerable men and women and says, "I'm going to help you choose life," because that's exactly what Jesus would do. The question is, will you step up and be a hero and help them accomplish this task that God has called them to? Thank you for allowing me to share.
So powerful. Thank you so much, Sean, for sharing these wonderful insights with us. I mean, it gives us so much understanding. It gives us so much more knowledge, just a way to step in and go, okay, what is it that God's calling them to do, and what is it that God's calling us to do? And so, men, I don't know if you heard, but two of the things that stood out to me. There's no moment of non-life. That means the unborn are alive. That means they're human beings. That means they have human rights. And if you follow those arguments, the scientific or the philosophical, you come to this conclusion, oh, that means I have to do something about this. You know, right now there's a gap in understanding and a gap in what people do. Tammy and her team, they stand in that gap. And so, men, we're asking you to stand in that gap with us. You know, our friend who's a pastor, a chaplain, just all around good guy, somebody who makes you just want to feel alive and makes you want to be a part of this is Joe Cole. And so he's one of those guys who decided, I'm going to not call myself a hero, but I'm just going to do the things that a hero would do and stay on the gap. And so, Joe, would you come on up?
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. Hey, listen, before I kind of get into some final things here and a few kind of closing words, I want to acknowledge something that I know we're all feeling, and maybe you might call it sorrow or loss or just a longing for, and I recognize it this morning as we gather in this odd way, that we're all on some level missing the world's greatest breakfast burrito. So it's my hope that you would find one and that you would be able to engage that. I mean, listen, I come to these breakfasts every year because of so many other things, but let's be honest, the burritos are the bomb.com, and I'm missing that today. Hey, listen, in all seriousness, I believe that this time in our world and this time in our community, every single one of us is looking for something to be different. We are all feeling a little because things aren't the way they were, and so we want something to change. And that might be connected to the economy or to your job or to your family or your household. But I think this season that we're in really reveals something deeper, that we want something deeper. We all want something to change. That change might be on the outside, but I think if we're honest, we all want something to change deep inside of us. Because the reality is that we're all looking for something. We're all looking for love and meaning and purpose and significance. And we already know that looking for that or those things in money and careers and the economy and our rights and relationships, like that stuff never works. But let me tell you what does work. Let me tell you where we do find our meaning and significance and love. And this is so the move and the way of Jesus. Love and peace and meaning and significance are always found in the service of others. And Jesus said it, I came to serve, not to be served. And so when we connect our lives to the service of others, things change. Our world changes, our communities change, and most importantly, those things deep inside that we long for the most change. They become the way they were supposed to be. And I want you to know this morning that this is why I support alternatives. This is why year after year, when Tammy calls me and says we need this or the trash taken out or whatever, my response is what time and when and where, and I'm all in. Because alternatives is not just some ministry that's trying to say some political thing or to try to change this one small thing, but they're deeply connected to the service of others. It's the way of Jesus. They serve, and I love that Tammy and her team, the board, the vision, they're all about building, they're all about building empathetic connections with other people. I love that Alternatives never says, hey, we can fix your problems in 3 easy steps. Because that's not what people want, because that's not the reality. That's not going to work. Rather, they'll look at folks, men and women in our community, and say, we love you and we value you. And so we're willing to wade into the mess that is life. We all understand what that's like. And to do life with you, to listen and to acknowledge and to share stories, to build empathetic connections. This is Jesus. And I believe this is our calling, to love God and to love others. We empathetically connect with those who cannot. We empathetically connect with the preborn, for they have no voice. Did you hear that? I mean, they can't speak up and say, hey, what about me? And so we connect with them to say, we'll speak for you. For there was a time when you and I were lost, when we had no voice, when we faced death all day long, and then God showed up in empathy and love. And love has a name, and his name is Jesus. This morning, this weird time together, this virtual thing that we've done is not just about fundraising. It's actually about you. It's actually about who you are and who you believe you are. This is about connecting your life to the deep needs of others. For this is where we find meaning, significance, and hope and love. This is where we draw closer to Christ himself. This changes the world. You know, I've told this story before, but in 1968, there was a teenage girl who got pregnant. And I think all the voices that were around her, certainly in that era, would have said and did say, you should kill that fetus. You should abort that baby and just get on with your life. It'll be better. No one will know, no one will care, and you can simply move on. And certainly the circumstances justified that action. But listen, it was people like Tammy and the staff at AMC that developed non-judgmental, empathetic connections with her. And through love and care and listening, through showing up in the middle of the night, through saying things like, you're gonna need this and we'll help you with that, and we'll connect you with food and resources, we're all in, wading into the mess. Because of those connections, 9 months later, she delivered a healthy, very, very good-looking baby boy. And that baby boy went on to grow up and to love Jesus and to serve and cherish his wife and to raise 4 sons, and that boy is me. I'm thankful for those people in my birth mom's life that stepped up. And every time I'm in Escondido and I'm at the clinic, or anytime I see Tammy or Hannah or one of the nurses or the volunteers, I think to myself, it was those people. Those are the people for me that stepped in and said that life inside of you matters. It's worth it. You're worth it. And I'm here today, and I'm thankful. And I'm thankful for those people, and I'm thankful for Tammy and her team that do this every day. I believe that abortion is wrong. And I believe that children, women, and men, that all humans, all people, in the words of Christ, are worth more than that, way more than that. So this morning, I believe that you are faced with a choice. You can either leave here today and say, well, maybe we'll support that, maybe we won't. You could leave here today and say, I'm going to pray about making a donation, or I'm going to pray about getting involved, and maybe you will and maybe you won't. And I want you to know that you're worth more than that. I want you to know that you can choose to experience love and meaning and significance in the service of others, and that can begin this morning by supporting AMC. It's actually about you. It's about you living into your value and worth in every way. This morning actually has the potential to change the world. It has the potential to change the life of a child, this guy. It has the potential to deeply change you. And so I'm not the kind of pastor that ever stood up and said, I want 10%, because I think you're worth more than 10%. So I'm going to actually ask you to give way, way beyond that. I'm going to ask you to give what matches your value and worth, what life is really worth. And I would give just about anything for my kids. And so this morning I'm asking that you give big. And it's more than just a check. And this is what I love about Tammy and the team, is it's more than just writing a check and sending it off. It's about connecting with them and what they're doing and hearing the stories and regularly showing up and supporting things at the walk or the next fundraiser or the times when things need to be cleaned or fixed or whatever. And we connect as community, and that changes the world. So this morning, I'm asking you to give, and I'm asking you to give big. I'm asking you not just to write a check this morning. I'm asking you to become a monthly supporter, to become someone that says, this is a stake in the sand. I mean, you heard these speakers. You're going to have a hard time walking out of here today and saying, that's not important. That's not my issue. You just can't say that, because your life matters. When you become a monthly supporter, then regularly you're going to hear those stories and those connections and be able to live in empathetic connections with other people. And I bet you that changes you, and I bet you that changes you in your neighborhood and with the people around you and with your spouse and with your children and so on and so on and so on. This is the way of Jesus. And so on your screen, what you'll see here in just a second is you're going to see the different ways to give this morning. And there are several different ways to give. I mean, our goal this morning is $50,000. We think that's very doable and reasonable in our community and in this time. I think in this time for my wife and I, finances really come into focus. What we thought was important isn't so important anymore. And what is important becomes even more important. So if somebody just wants to text us right now and give us a gift of $50,000, then we're all in. That would make things really easy, and we would love that. And then all the extra money we could use for burritos later on at the beach at my house. I'll text you my address. It'll be super good. But if no one's going to do that, then listen, you can text to give. You'll see that on the screen. You can send checks in. We'd love to cash those. We might add a zero just to be funny. You know, you never know. I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that. But there'll be an address on the screen too, and you can mail those checks. We want you to know that if you donate $500 or more, that your name will be placed on a really cool plaque. It's called the Wall of Heroes, and I've seen it. And it's pretty special when you walk in and you go, man, my name's on that. Once again, you'll recognize that you're making a difference, but it actually will make more of a difference inside of you in reminding you of your own value and worth. Don't forget that this will be on YouTube, and you have the power to share this link with every single one of your contacts and every single one of your friends on Facebook or whatever social media thing that you are into, and we would encourage you and ask you to do that. And you can tag all of these posts and all of these things with Alternative Medical Clinic in doing that. We thank you for being here today. Listen, as we leave here today, as we kind of go and turn our computers off and our TVs and kind of walk out of our office or wherever you're watching this from, I want you to carry something with you today. You could walk out into this world and you could be faced with all the stresses and the struggles and the I don't knows and the what ifs. But today I want to deeply sink into the belly of your soul these words. Today, I want to remind you that your life matters. All of it. All of your stress and struggle and grief and sorrow. All of your joy and celebration and art and kids and music and woohoo! I want you to know that all of it, that your life matters. I want you to know this morning that you have incredible value and worth. And I want you to know that you are deeply, deeply loved. It's not because of what you've done or what you haven't done. You're loved because of who you are. And I believe, fellas, that each and every one of you is created in the image of God and that you are his precious, precious son. Jesus loves you. Amen? Go in peace.